Welcome back to Life Beyond the Ladder, a podcast to help you design a second act you can't wait to live. I'm Dalisia Coppersmith, your midlife strategist and reinvention guide, inviting you to dream big and do exactly what you love. Let me ask you something to start today. When is the last time something in your life seriously changed? Not rearranged or shuffled around, actually changed. And here's the thing about ruts. Okay, when things don't change much, they don't arrive with a warning. They don't knock on the door and announce themselves. They just quietly become the shape of your days. One morning you wake up and realize, with a strange mix of like surprise and exhaustion, that you've been standing in the exact same spot for a lot longer than you meant to. That's what we're talking about today. Not the dramatic rock bottom moment. We're not talking about a crisis. The quiet, creeping sameness that settles in when we're not paying attention. And more importantly, what you do about it. Let's start with why ruts are so comfortable before they're obvious. Because they are comfortable. That's the whole problem. A rut feels like stability. It feels like knowing what to expect, like the path of least resistance, which, after years of hard work and responsibility, it can feel like reward. You stop making as many decisions. You stop encountering the friction that you used to because now you've made it. You stop having to try as hard. And for a while, that feels like rest after a hard mountain climb. But there's a moment, and you may have already had it, where the comfort starts to feel like something else. The sameness that used to feel like relief starts to feel like confinement. In the path of least resistance, it can feel less like a break and more like a box without windows. So that's the moment a rut reveals itself for what it really is. That moment is a gift because you can't climb out of something you haven't noticed yet, much less put a name to. So let's name some things. When I work with women over 40 or 45, I see 4 ruts come up again and again. And I'm not talking about physical fitness ruts. That conversation exists and it matters. Those are very real, and I have some experts that I can refer you to. But what we're covering today are 4 ruts that are harder to see and they're harder to talk about. They are the emotional, relational, professional, and creative ruts. Think about those areas of your life. I call them domains. Let's take them one at a time. So the emotional rut is the one where you've stopped feeling really much of anything new. You're not devastated. You're not particularly joyful. You're just fine, meh. You found a narrow emotional range that feels safe, and you've been living inside it for a while. You stopped taking the risks that would require you to feel something deeply, because feeling something deeply also means feeling the disappointment if it doesn't work out. So you've leveled off, and leveling off, if it's unchecked, becomes numbness. So next is number 2, the relational rut. This is where your relationships have essentially stopped growing. You're having the same conversations, the same dynamics, the same unspoken agreements about who you are to each other and what you're allowed to talk about, what you can't talk about. And this happens not only in your relationships at home or your romantic relationships, but it also happens with friends and even people at work. You love the people in your life, but somewhere along the way, the connection stopped deepening. And you've started to feel like you're not fully known by anyone. That's the relational rut. Rut number 3, the professional rut. It's probably the one you recognize most easily. As a matter of fact, we've been talking about it already on the podcast. It's the one where you could do your job in your sleep, and some days you practically do. So the challenge is gone because you're so good at what you do. The growth is gone. Maybe they're not really encouraging you to move onward and upward. Maybe you're not challenging yourself to do that. So what's left is competence without aliveness. And competence without aliveness, if you sustain that long enough, it starts to feel like a slow disappearing act. And then last but not least, we have the creative rut. This is the fourth one. This one is sneaky because you might not think of yourself as a creative person at all. But creativity isn't just art. Creativity is the part of you that makes something, anything, that solves a problem in some new way, that imagines what doesn't exist yet. It can express something that's very true about who you are. And when that muscle stops getting used, something goes quiet inside you that was never supposed to go quiet. You might feel it as boredom or restlessness that you can't name. You might feel it as a nagging sense that you're consuming life rather than contributing to it. That's the creative rut. Now, before we talk about how to climb out of it, I want to spend a moment on something important, and that's the difference between rest and stagnation, because they can look the same from the outside. And sometimes in the moment, they can feel the same too, but they're not. Here's the clearest way I know to tell them apart. Rest feels earned. It feels like a conscious exhale after a genuine effort. You know why you're resting. You know roughly how long you need. And when you've had enough of it, you feel ready to move again. Rest doesn't ask you to defend it to yourself. Stagnation is different. Stagnation has a shadow. It comes with some like low-grade sense that you should be doing something even when you can't quite name what that something is. Stagnation invites shame in through the back door. It's not the loud, obvious shame. It's that quiet kind that shows up as avoidance, shows up as distraction, as the habit of staying really busy with things that don't actually matter, so you don't have to sit with the truth that something important has stopped moving. If you've been resting, you know it, and you feel good about it, even if you've had to let a few things go to do it. But if you've been in a rut, kind of stagnating, some part of you knows that that's not where you should be. You probably already know which one applies to you lately, whether you have rested or whether you have been in a rut. Now, if you're one of the people that hasn't done either one, or you don't think that you have, I would say that busyness thing could be your rut. So if the rut sounded a little too familiar, let's talk about getting out. Here's a part that surprises most people. The first move out of a rut doesn't have to be big. In fact, the more entrenched the rut, the smaller the first move needs to be. See, the problem with being stuck in place isn't usually a lack of motivation. Like, we're motivated to get out of a rut. You know, sometimes a rut comes with a lot of pain. And so we are motivated. But the problem is the gap between where you are and where you want to be feels so enormous that taking any action at all seems almost pointless. So the brain does, what brains do when something feels overwhelming. It waits. It waits for the perfect moment. It waits for the right conditions. It waits for some moment in time when it feels ready, which is another way of saying it waits forever. The way out of that loop is not a big, grand gesture. It's a small, probably very specific, doable thing that proves to your nervous system that motion is possible. It's that one email you've been putting off, one conversation that you've been avoiding. It's an hour, spent on something that used to matter to you. One decision that you make, just one decision, any decision, that reminds you that you are still someone who can decide. That's it. Not the whole plan, not the big whole life transformation all at once, just the first small movement that breaks the stillness. And that tiny bit of momentum builds on itself. The second move is always easier than the first. The third is easier than the second. And before long, you're not in the rut anymore. You're in motion. And motion, once it has started, has a way of finding its own direction. So I'd love for you to journal about this before our next conversation. What's the rut you finally realize that you're standing in? Not the one you've been performing your way around or too busy to notice. The one that, if you're honest with yourself right now in this moment, you can feel. Just name it. And that's the first small move. And if you need a reminder on the categories that we talked about, emotional ruts, relational ruts, professional ruts, and creative ruts. So that move is all you need for today. One small movement out of whatever rut you find yourself in. I'm Dalisia Coppersmith, helping you build your life beyond the ladder. I'll see you next week.